We live in a highly delusional and dangerous world where people's beliefs and convictions continue to divide us. Theosophy's first task is to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or colour, and to unite firmly together a body of men and women of all nations in brotherly love, bent on pure altruistic work. This is our ongoing task. What is at the heart of this division? It is religion and non-religious belief. Sure, we could include ego-ridden selfishness, just prejudiced, greed, power-seeking, revenge, or pure evil. But the most potent force is the harnessing of divine power for selfish motives. Therefore, in this talk, I intend to survey some of the beliefs and non-beliefs that people have today and contrast this with the theosophical perspective. What is behind our existence? How sophisticated is our understanding of the absolute in the 21st century? In the proem of The Secret Doctrine, HPB sets out three fundamental propositions. The first paragraph of the first proposition reads, "An omnipresent, eternal, boundless and immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and could only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of thought. In the words of the Mandukya Upanishads, unthinkable and unspeakable." This first statement alone, I believe, is something that all of humanity could agree and sign up to, from the most militant atheist to the most fanatical extremist, if they were really honest.
You're very near the edge of this.
Oh, yes, no, it's, yeah, no. It's to create tension, is right. No. That the most militant atheist to the most fanatical extremist, if they were really honest and did not have their own agendas. More importantly, Theosophy teaches us all existence is one thing. This one thing is variously called the one life, the one reality. It is the source of being and of all beings. It is in everything. In fact, it is everything, and there is nothing else. The root of all nature, objective and subjective, and everything else in the universe, visible, invisible, is, was, and ever will be, one absolute essence, from which all starts and into which everything returns. However, we live in a mad, dysfunctional world of quiet desperation, where wise thought and insight is manipulated and twisted for the benefit of the powerful. More than half the world defines this principle as a reflection of their own personality. As a super tribal being steeped in historical baggage that is the creator of us and the universe. Whether we call this being God, Jehovah, Allah, Elohim, etc. Yes, he, as we still live in a misogynist society. He will have the attributes as stated in the proem. Omnipresent, eternal, boundless, etc. But some say they have a special and personal relationship with this invented omnipotent being. They have even said that certain people in history have had contact with this imaginary being and have recorded on paper, which they call sacred texts, what this being has said, or moreover ordered, or commanded on pain of death, and worse still, after death. Words like praise, worship, bow down, submit are often evoked, equally appropriate to a king as to a sky god. Although this might be laughable to this audience and the majority of sane grown-ups, as I have said, this is a serious reality for more than half the world's population, many of whom would die to defend their illusions. The fact being that when this idea of an all-seeing creator God was established many thousands of years ago, you could understand where they were coming from. Most of mankind was extremely parochial, moving a few hundred miles in their short life of maybe 30 or 40 years, uneducated and illiterate, lived on a flat earth at the centre of the universe with a canopy of stars above them in the shadows at night, a goldfish bowl. They lived in constant fear of famine, earthquake, volcanic destruction, disease, and wild animals. And if that wasn't enough, the threat of invading armies, utterly destroying their families by committing rape, pillage, and forced slavery would have been unbearable. Esoterically, a hell on earth. Trapped in a prison, honour the jailer and he might set you free. The idea of an all-powerful super being, creator or controller, who puts the food in the fishbowl, becomes a very real option. The shock of man's self-awareness in this threatening world caused such a trauma to the system that they were ready to abdicate responsibility of their existence, that a personal God became a necessity. Each tribe would focus their power in their own god, gods of war, gods of fertility, rain gods, etc. If one tribe was more successful than another, then their gods were obviously more powerful, and so converted to hedge their bets. These gods were a force to reckon with, fearful, jealous, wrathful, and genocidal. Would think nothing of sending down lightning bolts, meteors, causing earthquakes, or unleashing fire and brimstone from a volcano. The sort of God you would want on your side when facing your enemy. If you failed, there were two options. Either the opponent God was more powerful, a true God to be followed, or you had done something wrong, sinned, or did not do enough. So attracting the displeasure of your God. Maybe insufficient sacrifice, maybe. Did not kill enough bulls or murder enough children. This omnipotent fear figure could not be questioned. Tribal elites could use the power and fear of invented gods to control the people. The establishment of priests, gurus, hierophants, popes, pharaohs, gods, representatives on earth, clutching the keys of heaven, offering paradise in the hereafter, while you suffered here and now. Over time, like the capitalist system, many small companies end up as monopolies. Jehovah was a minor tribal god. As his popularity grew, other minor gods, such as Baal, Beelzebub, Moloch, Dagon, and Bel, were termed false gods and eventually were turned into powerful demons. Even Islam's Allah came out of a pantheon of 355 pagan gods, and 3 goddesses were possibly his daughters. But remember, Salman Rushdie was sentenced to death for writing such a thing. However, it was partly the Jewish religion that established the powerful idea of a single God, monotheism, copied by Islam later. Christianity later complicated things by the introduction of a trinity in one. Zoroastrianism was created with the importing of the concept of good and evil. Zoroastrians believe there is one universal, transcendent, supreme God, Ahura Mazda. The opposite force was Ahriman, the destructive principle, or chaos, that was later morphed by other cultures into the devil. Another useful invented concept that could be used to control the people. With us, with God. Against us, with the devil. a concept that sent millions to their death. I'm restricting myself here to the Western pantheon, as I was brought up within this tainted God-ridden culture. The famous Epicurean quote, which has never been answered by religion: is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able, but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence come evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? The truth being that all these omnipotent sky gods, whatever they are called or perceived to be, Jehovah, Allah, Elohim, are malevolent. They form a demon. They take away, stultify the sovereignty and royal destiny of mankind. The Gnostics were on the right track. A finite, imperfect demiurge is responsible for this world. The omnipresent, eternal, boundless and immutable principle had no part in its formation of the world, except for the spark in mankind. A world when life consumes life in the most horrible way, where this world is an arena or colosseum of suffering, where we delude ourselves with cruel beauty. Even if we confess to be a Buddhist or take on an Eastern way of life, if you have lived most of your life in the West, you will be similarly tainted by this God-ridden culture. It is so ingrained in our language, literature, culture, thought and philosophy, it can severely distort our understanding of the perennial wisdom which preceded this system of pantheon of gods. How many times have we heard people in Theosophy talk about good or bad karma? There's no such thing. Good and bad are human value judgments, devoting karma to a kind of Christian sin. Karma means action, work or deed. It refers to the spiritual principle of cause and effect, where intent and action of an individual cause influences the future of that individual effect. The individual will learn by experience and evolve into a more advanced being over time. Good and bad has nothing to do with it. Today in this secular country, we tend to split into three camps: religious, atheist, or don't care. Of course, in surveys, I'm not including Theosophists here, as they are statistically insignificant in surveys. They're known as others, grouped alongside the Jedi and the flying spaghetti monster. Does anyone know what people who follow the flying spaghetti monster are called? Pastafarians. If religious, they are active and passive. The vast majority are passives. They're just born into a religion, notably Roman Catholic, Church of England, Muslim, Hindu, and these types have nothing to do with their religion, but just identify themselves with a particular group. I was born a Catholic, I was born a Muslim. And this, of course, is nonsense. You were born a human being. I was probably not given the opportunity or could not be bothered to question your origins. Because my parents, family and neighbours are Jedi, I am Jedi. And I know the Force is with me. This is why religion and tribalism should always go together in one sentence. Religion is a cohesive lubricant in the workings of a tribe. The myth, a story satisfying for the emotional intelligence. And what staggers me is that these myths are as strong today as they ever were. These are examples of the passive types. But what are the active types? Humans are very consensus by nature and very susceptible to believe the tribal stories of their parents, family and loved ones, however absurd. Even more potent when a child's belief is moulded by the tribe over time. This is an inferior emotional intelligence at work here. You attack my belief, you attack my tribe. Let's look at just some examples here, and I've chosen these at random, but I think you may know of them, so it's worth saying. The Jehovah's Witnesses. Yes? We all know Jehovah's Witnesses, bless them. A tough ask to come to a stranger's door and talk about God. They're one of the many hundreds of pseudo-Protestant religious groups, simply because they have a reputation for knocking on your door at an inappropriate time. They're classified as a millenarian, non-Trinitarian, restorationist Christian denomination. The Theosophy is a nice short word. Yes. They used to continually predict the end of the world and then revise the date of Armageddon after the event, when it did not happen. They are now more sheepish about predicting the end. It would be funny if they had not ruined a number of gullible families along the way. The whole religion is controlled by a small band of white middle-aged men, a bit like me really, but without the ponytail. And from an office in the Watchtower Society, Brooklyn headquarters. From there, the Watchtower magazine is distributed throughout the world, the teachings of which take precedent over the Bible. They have about 8.5 million evangelists and a total following of about 15 million worldwide. And I'm fond of this group for the naive 19th century ideas. And once I nearly converted or seriously messed up 2 door knockers, so much so that 2 elders from the church called the following week to question me, and I've been blackballed ever since. It's always amazed me how ignorant converts are about their own religion. I want a word of warning about these groups. If they were born into the religious cult and their family and friends are members, then I would not challenge them. These groups have an awful reputation of what they call disfellowshipping you. You lose everything. Even their parents disown them, which shows the corruption of these groups, the corruption of the groups represent. Luckily, many of these cults have died out these days. However, if they were new converts, then they're fair game. After all, they knocked on your door. We move on now to an equally well-known and interesting group, the Mormons, the great tax-free corporation religion of America. 2 incredibly naive, nice, polite, clean-cut young men in ties, white short-sleeve shirts and tight-cropped haircuts, asking you to read the Book of Mormon from the Church of Latter-day Saints. Fortunately, if you've watched Time Team on television, I think most people have watched that. Time Team, the archaeology program, and the digging into it, yeah. Well, if you've watched it, you've probably got some basic knowledge of archaeology. You would realise that the Book of Mormon was as authentic as Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars. And yes, Lord of the Rings is fiction. It was established the year before HPB was born in 1830. Unfortunately, Joseph Smith, plausible to uneducated Americans, was not prepared for modern 21st century forensics galactic investigation. Simply, there is no archaeology whatsoever. Horses, cattle, donkeys, swine, wheat, barley, money, all arrived in America with the Spanish and other Europeans, way after the Book of Mormon was written, where all these things were cited. There are no artifacts, arrowheads, swords, pottery, DNA corpses to substantiate any of the Book of Mormon. A complete fabrication. You now know why the toughest course at the Mormon Brigham Young University is archaeology. Even their museum has nothing in it. However, it is a very interesting religion to study, especially if you have a Masonic background. The temple ceremonies, where you were given sacred protective undergarments, known as magic undies, to wear for life, have a square and compass embroidered on the chest. These young kids that come around know nothing of their Masonic origins. Again, there are about 15 million adherents worldwide, mainly in Utah, although they might be seen by us as figures of fun. Mitt Romney, remember the name Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney was taken as a serious candidate for the presidency of the United States of America. The most powerful man in the world believed that Joseph Smith was able to interpret reformed Egyptian hieroglyphs from missing gold plates by putting a couple of stones in a top hat and looking your face in the top hat. So, but you couldn't make this stuff up. However, an atheist or a theosophist could not become president of the United States. Go figure. But now for the evangelicals. I was one once, I can speak with authority. Another bunch of Looney Tunes. And I'm not, of course, talking about your decent middle-class Church of England neighbour, who does the flowers at the local church, now with monthly services with a rotary vicar to service the congregation of 6 elderly ladies. These people who are educated enough to come to some sort of amicable, fuzzy compromise about evolution and the myth of the Bible, but still feel that theosophy is from the devil. Sadly, a comfortable, benign, dying tradition in this country. Mainly because I love old churches, so, I like to go along. No, I am talking about the loud, wacky American creationists that believe that the world is about 6,000 years old and can prove it pseudo-scientifically and believe that the Bible is literally true. See, all religions need authority, or they're just opinions or hearsay. The Catholics have the Pope, ordained by God's apostolic representatives on earth, i.e. traces his authority back to Jesus himself, who is God incarnate. The Protestants, having rejected the Pope, based their authority on the Bible, and strangely enough, only on the King James Version. Therefore, to maintain their authority, all must be literally true. I remember one American lady saying after reading some passages from some of the newfangled hip-written versions of the Bible, she said, if the King James Bible was good enough for Jesus, it's good enough for me. And this is a country where 20% of the people believe that Joan of Arc was Noah's wife. Again, it would be funny if there were not amongst the most affluent and powerful lobby in the world, expecting the rapture to occur at any time, funding Israel to rebuild the Temple on the Mount to fulfill biblical prophecy of the end times. Climate change and destruction of the planet is irrelevant, as God made the world perfect. But moreover, again, you could not become President of the United States unless you confessed to being a Christian and bought into this drivel. This brings me sadly to the last of these groups, the Islamic death cults, that we are all familiar with. I term it that, as most Muslims that I know are a bit like the Church of England ladies. Their faith is a comfort, a continuity in a changing world, a sign of their culture and tradition, and generally harmless. Sure, it does need culturally updating, and it will with further exposure to the West. No, we are talking here about the 20th century fascist political system, using Islam as a cohesive vehicle, diametrically opposed to science and technological advancement and the corrupt, decadent West way of life. All religions change and morph radically over time. One generation would not recognise even 3 or 4 generations back. These radicals, just like many schism religions of the past, believe that the world is corrupt, and the only way back to a golden age is to live a rather restricted form of invented Islam in submission to the concept of another demon sky god. But instead of their myth being based on love and compassion, it is based on hate and revenge and testosterone, and doomed to failure. A warped romantic delusion of a Camelot caliphate under Sharia law stained with oil money. This same God that when a Holocaust survivor said, if there is a God, then he should come down here and ask for my forgiveness. These fanatics state that the West have systematically invaded, bombed and destroyed their Muslim homes and families in their Islamic homelands, mainly gained by conquest, and that the West are the serpents of the devil, the infidel crusaders. There are a number of factors that make this utopian nightmare extremely potent and attractive. Young men and women who feel disaffected, disenchanted, treated as foreign in their own countries, discriminated against with lousy job prospects and have lost hope. Include poverty, drugs and criminality for further isolation, make them prime targets, especially if brought up as a Muslim, and know the culture and exposed to radical ideology at home or university. Brainwashing, propaganda and cult grooming techniques via social media in the comfort of your own bedroom. You are groomed, love-bombed by others like you who share your grief and anger. So the definition of a cult. The most potent ingredient of all is the endless funds available. One ingredient the West worships and will sell its own soul for is money. However, they believe that this money given by God to their radicals to destroy their enemies, much of the money comes from Saudi Arabia to promote its austere Wahhabi form of Islam, together with contributions from other oil states sources. To show how sick all this is, Turkey was buying Islamic State oil from occupied Syria areas whilst supposedly fighting them on the other hand. Never mind China stepping up production of inflatable boat manufacture to aid the traffickers of refugees. Unfortunately, Islam itself is also to blame. The Quran provides the motives for ambiguous interpretation and separation. It is evangelical, usually by force, and condemns those who have different beliefs. Apostates in Muslim countries are condemned to death. It is a religion of submission, discipline and fear, ideal for interpretation by radicals and fascists. Within this cocktail of dictatorship, cruelty, poverty, poor education, corruption and the medieval mindset, they are also being threatened by the greatest terrorist on earth, America. Hopefully when the oil runs out, the West has consumed this medieval culture, as it has done in most of the places in the world. This cancer of extreme death cult will be eradicated. We all face a real dilemma in this world. Do we take part or isolate ourselves and just be spiritual? Remember one thing written on the wall, the Holocaust exhibition in London. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. This is why we should support the peace mala that's here. At least it's something that we can use to fight against these things. I won't continue with this rant on Abrahamic desert tribal religions that has distorted our human consciousness for so long, but I would like to examine briefly the other side of the coin, atheism and agnosticism. Atheism, defined as disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of God or gods. And I've never really understood what they were on about. The word atheism, without or no God, in the light of the first proposition, well, we could all call ourselves atheists. The problem I have is that you have to define what you don't believe in. Most religious forms of God, the God that sends the angel Gabriel to a cave to dictate his words to an illiterate undesirable, or a God who committed genocide against the enemies of his chosen people, or the God who sent his only son to earth to die a horrible death on the cross just to forgive mankind his sins, then yes, I'm an atheist, as I feel morally superior to these gods. It is very interesting and very difficult to look into the statistics of atheism. The number varies so much depending on which country you analyse. Let's briefly look at Britain. A poll in 2004 by the BBC put the number of people who do not believe in God at 39%. Younger people were less likely to believe in God than older people. Those surveyed also had generally a negative view of religion, with 41% of those surveyed agreeing with the statement that religion is more often the cause of evil in the world. However, when you look at the US, the picture is quite different. According to a 2011 Gallup poll, more than 90% of Americans say yes when asked the basic question, do you believe in God? However, when given the choice to express uncertainties, the percentage of belief in God drops to about the 70-80 range. Now, ignoring China and the Gulf states, where state intervention has distorted the statistics, the northern, more educated countries tend to favour a life force to a God. The EU demographics, I wrote this before we came out of Europe, by the way. The EU demographics of 27 countries show that 51% believe there is a God, 26 believe in a life force, and 20 are atheists. The problem atheists have is trying to explain away their presence. Being a complete random accident of nature, to me, does not stack up. It just shows a complete lack of imagination. It is the belief that there is nothing, and nothing happened to nothing, and then nothing magically exploded for no reason, creating everything, and then a bunch of everything magically rearranged itself for no reason whatsoever into a self-replicating bits, which then turned into dinosaurs. Mind you, if you contrast that with a definition of Christianity, Christianity was once described as a belief that a brought back to life cosmic Jewish rabbi can make you live forever if you symbolically eat his flesh and telepathically tell him you accept him as your master, so he can remove an evil force from your soul that is present in humanity, because a ribbed woman who was convinced by a talking snake to eat from a magical tree. That also makes a lot of sense. I find atheism sad. I would rather be delusional and make up something to believe in. Like the lottery, if you don't buy a ticket, you never win. In a graveyard in Cornwall, down my way, there's a gravestone with an inscription that simply says, "Here lies an atheist, all dressed up and nowhere to go." Many people also term themselves agnostics. A very interesting position to take. According to the philosopher William L. Rowe, agnosticism is the view that human reason is incapable of providing sufficient rational grounds to justify either the belief that God exists or the belief that God does not exist. I agree, but why stop there? But as humans, we must go beyond mere human reason and rationalism. That's what occultism is all about. So what do we have left after religion, atheism and agnosticism? Science, maybe. But science is just a method. It can only tell you about facts and observations. It can present data and make a hypothesis that can be tested and verified, resulting in a theory which allows for prediction and replication, a very powerful tool against Maya. But as Karl Popper stated, to be a scientific statement, it must be able to be falsified. Therefore, science is an ongoing rational activity, part of our act of evolving, but no more so than art and creativity. So where does this bring us? We need a different approach, and this is where the divine wisdom, Theosophy, comes in. To me, the one crucial fact above all else, which can only be experienced, is that all is one. This means the whole lofty universe, material and non-material, cannot be without you being a part of it. Any universal consciousness, any omnipresent, eternal, boundless, or immutable principle cannot be without you. It therefore suggests, as sentient beings, being self-aware, that we are, however lowly, one form of expression of that omnipresent, eternal, boundless and immutable principle. We must fit into the big picture somewhere. From the Hermetica, more precisely, the cosmos exists as a developing idea within the field of consciousness of a being whose true nature is beyond all conception. All celestial bodies and the entities inhabiting them are thus partial expressions of this same process of ideation and its associated consciousness. We, self-conscious beings, create the universe and the universe creates us. The divine wisdom states that consciousness came first and the physical manifestation of the universe is an expression of that consciousness. We have direct proof of the kingdoms below human kingdom, the mineral, the plant, the animal, and we are told that there are other kingdoms and we are to create the universe. We must move through these kingdoms back to the source. There, in a nutshell, is a crude panorama of the cyclic path of man's existence, and without mentioning the G word. This big picture and the big story is so magnificent, awe-inspiring, amazing, stunning, stupendous and astonishing that a God with a big G becomes not only superfluous and irrelevant, but superfluous to requirements. If only man could take on board this vision, and as William Blake so aptly puts it, to see the world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. And finally, you may think that I've been harsh about people's beliefs in God. However, I will leave you with what K.H. said in the Mahatma letters. K.H. says, quote, "The God of the theologians is an imaginary power. Our chief aim is to deliver humanity from this nightmare and to teach man virtue for his own sake and to walk in life relying on himself instead of leaning on a theological crutch that for countless ages was a direct cause of nearly all human misery. Pantheistic we may be, agnostic never. The one life which occultists speak is anything but an extra cosmic deity, infinite and all-pervading. It is the essence of every atom of matter in infinite space and is in fact matter itself. And commenting on the behaviour of Jehovah as portrayed in the Hebrew Bible, KH says, "He who reads our Buddhist scriptures, written for the superstitious masses, will fail to find in them a demon so vindictive, unjust, so cruel and so stupid as the celestial tyrant upon whom the Orthodox Christians prodigiously lavish their servile worship, and on whom their theologians heap those perfections that are contradicted on every page of their Bible." He goes on to say that ignorance created gods, and cunning took advantage of the opportunity. The sum of human misery will never be destroyed in the name, the sum of human misery will never be diminished until that day when the better portion of humanity destroys in the name of truth, morality, and universal charity on the altars of their false gods. To realise that namaste really means to bow to the divine in you. Maybe this may be the way forward when mankind can see this omnipresent, eternal, boundless and immutable principle in every one of us. But things are changing slowly. What we are witnessing is not the resurgence of religion, but the death throes. Tribal religion is becoming unfashionable as education improves. The divine wisdom must fill that gap, or the next flying spaghetti monster might take over. Thank you.